All right. So welcome back to the Eternal Student Podcast. Today I have Karen Pando-Mars, and we will be talking about a new book with her and Diana, Tailoring Treatment to Attachment Patterns, Healing Trauma in Relationship. It's the book. So Karen, just have you introduce yourself, just a little bit about yourself, where you're from, and what got you into therapy.
Oh, okay. Anyway, thanks, Gerald.
Yeah.
Happy to be here and have this conversation with you. Um, where I'm from, well, right now I live in California, in San Anselmo, California, which is north of the Bay Area, the San Francisco Bay Area. But I grew up in New York, so I'll just say
Oh,
that. So that's where
wow.
I'm from.
Okay. All right.
Okay.
New York.
Um, and how I got into therapy. I mean, honestly, I was a Spanish major in college.
Oh,
My dad grew up in Argentina. My grandfather's from Peru. And after college, I felt like I needed time to figure out what I wanted to do. So I went to Peru with the plan either to live there for a year and get really fluent in Spanish or just to figure things out. I stayed with cousins. And what ended up happening was I had a lot of conversations with my cousin who was a school psychologist.
oh, wow.
I started thinking, what motivates people beneath culture? So
Mm,
that question just got really deep in me. And I ended up deciding not to stay in Peru for a whole year, just a few months. Came back to the States. By that time, my mom was in San Diego. So I went to San Diego and I thought, oh, that question is psychology. So I went to San Diego State and took a post baccalaureate, a 30 units of psychology so I could apply to graduate school.
oh, wow.
So I kind of got there through this lens of what motivates people beneath culture. I was super interested in that. And later, when I discovered AEDP in 2005, somewhere along the line, it occurred to me like, oh, wait a minute, here's that question.
Mm,
Motivation. Diana Fosha is super into motivation and transformance and the healing drives, but attachment and emotion are motivational forces that hit all of us
yeah,
humans and
yeah,
animals, some mammals, beneath culture.
for
So,
sure. Wow.
so that was my main journey. That
Yeah.
there.
Okay. And so obviously you wrote this with Diana, right?
Uh-huh.
But in terms of attachment, why did that interest you? Just attachment and attachment.
Yeah. I mean,
What? Yeah.
I can say two things. I mean, when I started, when I met Diana, she came out to California and did one of these one day courses through the California Association of Marriage and Family Therapists, our Marin chapter.
Hmm.
And what she had to say was just riveting. And actually, the flyer that I read, Core Change Through Heart to Heart Connection, talked about AEDP as attachment, emotion, transformation, brain science. And I was reading all of these things thinking, this is all the stuff that happened after I got my degree.
Mm,
I got my license in 89, and so much happened in the 90s. So, the decade of the brain, all the neuroscience, all the attachment research really came forward. So, when I saw that flyer from Diana, I thought, oh, this is like all the missing pieces. My training was really experiential and meditation based. I went to the California Institute of Integral Studies,
okay.
East West philosophy, psychology, great meditation training, being in the moment, tracking experientially. I knew how to unfold process, but I wasn't always sure where to go. And so
Okay.
when I met AEDP, it was like, oh my gosh, there's these maps. But that's really the attachment part just seemed so important for the relational work of therapy. So that's what
And
caught
I
me.
also look at that as the missing, because I didn't get a lot of education around attachment. And I said styles, but in the book you talk about view them as patterns. Can you
Hmm.
talk a little bit about why? that's that difference for you?
Yeah, sure. My first my first go around was this paper that I wrote in 2016. It was published in AEDP's Transformance Journal, and there I talked about tailoring interventions to attachment styles. And from that, we ended up getting this book contract through Norton to write the book. And in the process of research and writing and thinking more deeply about what I was doing, I learned that the early research talked about the patterns between infant and caregiver. And Mary Ainsworth's work in The Strange Situation, she was looking at how the pattern changes by relationship. So a kid can have a different set of behavioral responses to the different parents, to the different caregivers. And I started seeing how the word styles came from the adult attachment research.
Mm, okay.
And, just unpacking all that, it just started to make sense to me that when people come to us for help, they notice I have these different patterns that keep recurring in relationship.
Hmm.
And style seems more fixed and
Okay.
more like I have this style, but it's kind of an idea where pattern is like what happens moment to moment. So I
Okay.
just got really intrigued by how pattern seems like the right word for how to facilitate change and healing and therapy.
Yeah, no, for sure. And kind of so more of a flexible or moving or dynamic, right, way of being or
Well, exactly, because patterns is like component parts that repeat in different sequences, right? And so then I developed these grids. What are the configurations of each pattern? Because there's all these moving parts,
right,
And so what I like about that is someone might have an idea that I'm this or that, but might act differently based on the conditions in the relationship. And so
right,
then we can look at the different rows and the different, what do we say, columns, the columns of the pattern and the rows of the different aspects of each pattern and be like, oh, wait a minute. In this place, arousal's leading to shutting down. In this place, arousal's leading to hyperactivation. And
yeah,
so it just helps to kind of get less fixed on the idea of what's happening and really observe like what actually is going on and what can I do to be of help.
okay. And if we can just kind of break down those patterns that you like the basic, what are those patterns that you identify in the book?
Okay. Well, secure
Okay,
is, Diana has these great shorthand versions. Secure is being able to feel and deal with what happens in life. And then we have these insecure patterns. So we have the avoidant, which is succinctly dealing, not feeling.
okay,
Avoid ambivalent resistant, which is feeling and reeling, not dealing.
yeah,
And then disorganized, not feeling, not dealing.
okay,
Those are very short ways to kind of conceptualize them, but they're helpful. They're helpful hints.
yeah. How, when you have those basic attachment patterns and like say we're speaking to new therapists,
Uh-huh.
how important, not to say like not the fixed view, like this person is here, this is, but how important is it from your experience of even allowing the client, the patient to know what style or pattern um, comes up for them? Like how have you seen how important that's been for somebody to say, "Oh, this is me"?
Mm-hmm. I'm less I was really thinking about how do I use this? I so much work with it in the moment
Okay.
as opposed to this is who I am.
Yes. Yep.
Because I actually think when we get, in ADP, when we get to this is me, we're getting to the core self that's actually beneath the pattern, which I think is like our patterns are often our strategies to survive.
Yeah.
But in therapy, in a way, we're kind of healing into having less, having more flexibility, having more flexible defenses, having less ways, less need to protect through avoiding or clinging or dismissing or being preoccupied. So, um, what would I say for a new therapist? I really like to help folks recognize the way that they're affected by someone's way of being. So if
Mm.
I have someone who's super dismissive,
Mhm.
as a new therapist, I might think I'm doing something wrong. If they're sort of pushing me away, I might think you know, a, a more senior therapist probably not would probably know what to do or would probably get the right response from the person, as opposed to realizing like, oh, I noticed that your hand is like brushing off this question I'm asking you about, where this comes from or what's happening inside,
Yeah,
So really I like to help new therapists become aware that there's often an interaction that's going on that can set up what we call in the book common therapist reactivity. So if I'm being dismissed, I might feel like I'm inadequate or I'm not okay or something's,
right.
wrong, or I might intellectualize and try really hard to explain, you know.
Yeah,
So it's helpful to know and learn how to pick up signals and see, wait a minute, what is going on here?
yeah. And this is, I mean, just from my own experience, and not when we don't pay attention to what's happening inside of us, like as we're relating and going back and forth with a client. So us not being aware of our patterns with
Right,
reinforcement, right?
right,
I think can really create that, I think, disconnection, right, from therapeutic stance and really disrupt that closeness.
right, right. Right, because if I have a tendency to avoid emotion, I might not recognize tears forming in my client's eyes, or I might not hear the slowing down, sort of filling up with getting choked up a bit, or I might let someone talk through emotion, thinking that what they have to tell me is more important than actually feeling what's stirred.
Yeah,
So the more I think us as therapists really get to know ourselves and get to know our relationship to our own emotional life or our own, tendencies and relationship. I think that is so important, you know,
yeah, yeah.
so
No, I mean it is. I think, too, and I'll just be open about this. Sometimes we don't want to, as therapists. And sometimes this is kind of looked down upon in terms of doing that exploration while you're with your client. This is why I like ADP, because you are doing moment to moment for the client, right? But also yourself. And so the book, when it talks about the therapist, I kind of, lit up because it's
Mhm.
important for us, yeah, to really just be aware of what's happening. So,
can I give you an example? What's
yeah,
coming to me as I'm listening to
yeah,
you
for sure.
is I'm thinking about how anxiety can come into the room, and there
Yeah,
can be sort of a shakiness. And I can think of sometimes in myself, I've sat with someone and I feel a little bit like a deer in the headlights. And then I recognize like, oh, wait a minute, I'm I'm feeling nervous right now.
yeah,
Oh, okay. If I can notice that in myself and invite the client to say, like, hey, can we slow down for a second? Kind of want to take a deep breath and just feel my feet on the floor. And I really would like to invite you to do that with me. Because I think there's some anxiety in the room here, and it would be really helpful if we could just take a minute. How would that be for you?
yeah,
And then most of the time, if I'm feeling that, the client's like grateful to be like, oh yeah, okay, thanks. Or
yeah.
um,
Sure, for sure.
but that takes bravery, right? As a therapist to admit, like, oof, I'm feeling nervous right now.
So,
So often the thing is like, oh, power through, don't show it, don't reveal. But I think in ADP, it's like, we kind of recognize this is a field and there's two of us. We just had that conference in it together. We're kind
Sure.
of in it together. And when we open ourselves up to try to help someone, guess what? Right brain to right brain goes in both directions and we can be affected. And so, by being you know, being able to tend to ourselves, it's not like stuff doesn't come up, but maybe I have practice. And so I can lend that practice to my client.
Oh, for sure. And I think it can calm the client's nervous system down to we are human, right? In
Hmm.
terms of, yeah, I get anxious during session, too. And to even be able to verbalize that to a client, I've seen such a softening, a just moments of relaxation, like, oh, they are human, So I think that also adds to, the attachment pattern from therapist to client.
I
If you,
mean, I think what you're saying is it adds to safety.
yeah,
Oh, 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 you're human too. Okay.
right.
You know, I can take a deep breath. It's less like, yeah, you're acting on me or something, but
Yeah.
you're like another person who can help me.
Yeah, yeah, no, for sure. Um, is there, if you were to focus on one of those patterns and kind of tease it out a little bit more, you can pick any one of those patterns. Um, and so we can just kind of dive a little deeper into, I think we're going to do more of these and go through the book, but uh,
Hmm.
what pattern uh, for you?
For some reason, the ambivalent resistant pattern comes up because when this whole project started, I remember, some students said, "What do you do when people have these different attachment styles?" And then
Mm,
I remember I was in a supervision group and someone said to me, like, "What about that person who's talking, talking, talking like a runaway train? Like, what do you do?" And I don't know, somewhere along the line, I kind of coined the phrase wall of words and
mm,
wall of silence. With the avoidant pattern around attachment, there's often a wall of silence. And with ambivalent resistant, the preoccupied
yeah,
stance, there's often this wall of words. A person is speaking, but actually, I don't feel close, or
mm,
they're emoting. And we call emotionality when there's like tears leaking, but I'm not moved by the tears. So there's this, what we have come to see is this hyperactivating style or pattern that, speaking, changing topics, like I've got to get it all out. I've got to get it all out. And
mhm,
and yet the frantic feeling just keeps spinning. Um, and so I found it really important and helpful to really identify ways to help that someone using that pattern to
mhm,
slow down, to finish one thought, to let me be with them. And sometimes there's such a worry because the caregiver tended to be so inconsistent or not able to tune in. So there's this, I need you, but I doubt you can really be there for me. And
yeah,
so there's this kind of mixture, the ambivalence, the mixture that as therapists can be confusing.
mhm,
But if I recognize that this is this like longing to be gotten and held and helped that just has no trust that this is actually going to happen, it can kind of stabilize me as a therapist to slow myself down, to try to bring some calm into the room, to be firm, to maybe say, I want to hear you.
yeah,
And I need to take it a step at a time. Because I have
yeah,
made the mistake of thinking, oh, I'll let them get it all out first. And then there's so many topics on the table. Where do we begin?
right, right,
Right. And so I need to help the person learn to help me to help them by trying to, we'll get to what we need to get to, but it's really going to be better if we can take it one topic at a time, one moment at a time,
yeah.
one
What
feeling at a time.
what do you say to that? Therapist often, I feel rude or I feel right, like for stopping them, and yeah, how do you manage that even in session with that pattern?
when I'm working with the person or when I'm working with the therapist working with the person?
The person,
The
you and the
person.
person in the room.
You
Yeah.
know, I try to affirm in some way, like, hold on for a second, hold on. I really want to hear you. And there's so much coming out so fast, I can't hold it all. And I want to be able to work with you. So if we can take things a bit slower, it would really help us to feel like we can, get somewhere.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I try to be kind, be firm, like nurture them, affirm my intention to hear them,
Yeah,
but to
for
help
sure.
them learn that I'm actually stopping them because I want to hear them.
Yeah. Not because they're too
Doing it wrong.
right.
Right. Because the fear of doing it wrong is immense.
Yeah.
Right. And so oftentimes therapists, that's where the training comes in. Therapists will be like, oh, but I want to accept them. I want to be with them. And yes. You know, and then sometimes I listen as long as I can for longer than I might because I can tell the person really has to be heard, and so I'm going to make suggestions and then I'm going to,
Yeah.
break the rules or whatever, just because it's about attunement, and just trying to learn. I think I'm always learning about each person I see. As much as I try to create all this structure in this book, it
Yep.
really is person to person, dyad to dyad,
Moment to moment.
interaction to interaction.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's, again with ADP, that moment to moment, right? Interaction is so important. And we have all of these theories and all of these things, but even just being able to slow someone down and lock in, right?
Hmm.
That does for your nervous system. And when we're talking about this pattern, specifically, kind of imagining even what that does inside for them. Because you said caregiver, right? So do you view the caregiver in the room
I
as
mean,
there with you?
I'm trying to be the best I can be to give what was missing. So I want to try to be reliable, predictable, caring, show up. Um, but when I'm seeing folks, I am recognizing that they didn't invent this behavior. This was an adaptation to the way they were treated,
Mhm.
which was probably that person's adaptation to the way they were treated, so it's like it's a
Right.
long legacy. So it's not about judging, but more about trying to meet it and help. And someone with this pattern, we also talk about the one of the directions, the goals is to help the self feel effective and competent and develop agency. Because if you think about it, as a little kid, if you're not able to get the help you need, the self actually feels like, oh, I'm not good enough or I'm not effective. And
Yeah.
so part of what we're trying to do is actually help the person kind of come back home to, oh, those signals that are driving me actually are meaningful. And if I can be with them and kind of understand them and help them to feel understood, um, that's the beginning of self-understanding and self-trust and
Yeah.
being able to have self-esteem and self-confidence and trust in
Yeah. Yeah.
myself.
Yeah. And always, try to pay attention that the caregivers in the room, the kids in the room that experience that, even though the therapist isn't the parent, right? But that is it's automatic, right? Like that authority, even though, you try to be, connected even, but that those things are in the room. Um, And so, as you're watching this with a client and you understanding what's happening in you as you're, working with clients, and it isn't always
Mhm.
positive moments, but just as a therapist, you know,
It's interesting you're saying that. I was working with someone the other day, and um, I was really aware they were really like really wanting to share something and having a really hard time opening up.
Mm-hmm.
Shame and difficulty and I was aware in the moment, like I felt the difficulty and I felt the need to bring kindness, to bring compassion, to bring patience, to bring, you know, um, like co-regulation. Um, but in the moment, it was like I felt the challenge, I felt the difficulty, and I did my best to meet it. And then I got curious. And then later I looked at the session and I was like, oh, we were just right in the moment, moment to moment. And it didn't look as difficult as it felt to me,
Yeah.
if that makes
Yeah.
sense.
Yeah. A
But
lot.
I think that's because having a lot of experience, my capacity to reflect on my experience is operating with the experience. So
Right.
I'm like noticing and probably shifting course and doing my best to respond and to help and to see what's needed and to be present. And, there's all this going on. And yet I'm trying to just create space and welcome presence,
Yeah. Yeah.
So I don't know. I don't know how that was to hear. That was a big,
Yeah.
it's like, that's just what was coming to mind. Like there can be a lot going on these days, but trying to offer space and quiet too. It's like
Yeah.
managing.
Yeah. And the oftentimes the clients are looking at you to know, to feel, and they may not express it right. But when Eileen Russell talks about the transformational other,
Hmm.
grounded or will share what you're feeling, can you talk a little bit about just being that transformational other, having the knowledge related to attachment, and with this specific attachment pattern, kind of what that responsibility or role?
Hmm. I mean, one of the things that we write about and is part of the grids is we talk about therapist common reactivities in relation to each pattern and therapist meta skills.
Yeah.
The meta skills are like intentional sensitivities to try to meet what was missing. So
Mm,
if the person is expecting, you know, inconsistency or uncertainty can trigger, like you're really not there for me, abandonment, I might really want to say, I'm here right now and I really want to be with you.
mhm.
So I might intentionally name I'm here to kind of counter that fear of like you're not there, you're not, or there's a fear of being judged or seen as inadequate or not okay. I
Yeah.
might bring in a moment like I just want you to know I'm feeling so much kindness and care and compassion here. Like I see the challenge. What's it like to get that? Can you take in any of that compassion and kindness? The person, might say, yeah, a little bit. Okay, what happens when you can take in just a little bit?
Mhm.
Well, maybe I can take a little bit more for myself. Maybe I can bring a little compassion to myself. Okay, can we breathe into that? Can we
Yeah.
just give that some room? So that's like really trying to use myself to create a new possibility that the
Yeah.
person can then take for themselves.
Yeah. I mean, that's in the book, you said you call them they're meta skills.
Hmm.
Um, how important, just even outside of, because not everybody is familiar with AEDP and the recording and of the sessions. But if you could talk about meta skills, just generally, uh,
Hmm.
what would that be? Just what are they like? Just kind of down to the bones.
For example, when working with someone having an avoidant pattern, what we know from the caregiver studies, the AAI, and the observational studies is that, you know, in childhood, that avoidance is used when there's an expectation of rejection or
Mm,
intrusion or humiliation. So, meta skills are my way of trying to counter those caregiver hallmarks
okay.
of being dismissing, of being rejecting, of being humiliating, of being shaming, and or the therapist's reactivities of in the face of being dismissed, feeling ineffective or feeling uncertain or such. If I can try to cultivate and draw on what's going to help. If
Hmm.
I'm expecting rejection, I want to bring a meta skill, meaning like a choice. I want to choose acceptance.
Mm,
You know, if I'm rendered ineffective because I'm being dismissed, I might need to draw on a meta skill of courage. I might need to consciously like cultivate, okay, I'm going to step forward and I'm going to move towards this, even though I'm feeling pushed away,
yeah.
right? I'm going to like take a breath and move forward. So, meta skills are like those, that layer above skill, like when I'm choosing
Yeah.
from cultivating something that I want to help, that I want to bring forward.
Okay.
Um, does that make sense?
Yes, no, for sure. And and since undoing aloneness, right? This is all that's coming up for me when I'm hearing you, like with the
Mhm.
attention, being there, the eye contact, the focus. How does this intervention work specifically for clients who attachment histories are defined by neglect or emotional abandonment?
Uh-huh. I mean, so in AEDP, we have this intention to undo aloneness. I think sometimes with some folks who have, neglect and serious have been seriously alone with their traumas,
Mhm.
there's not a lot of um like wired in experiences of being together with someone. So sometimes I can ask, like, can you feel me with you? And the person might look at me like, I don't know. Yeah, you're there. I don't know what you mean. And
Yeah.
so, it's like taking our time, and that doesn't mean we're doing it wrong or something's not effective. We say in ADP, there's the therapist's comment and the client's response. That's the unit of intervention. So if
Mm,
someone says, like, I don't know, then I know my work is to say, well, how about this? Take a look into my eyes and see what you can see. Oh, you look like a nice person.
mm,
Thank you. What else? Is there anything else? Oh, I know. You're a therapist and I pay you. I know you do. But is there anything you can see? And then, some folks will be like, well, I can tell you're kind and you're looking at me with care. I can see that. Wow. What's that like? You can see that. What's that like to feel that? Okay, well, maybe I can see it, but it doesn't, like nothing happens. Okay, but you did see it. So that's
right.
great. So sometimes it's like a little bit, and that might even be a lot for someone with super big neglect. It might take even longer to get there, but um, it's a big thing. And then some people come in and you might say, "Can you feel me with you?" And they're like, "Yes." And it's so helpful. Thank you.
Mm.
Some people just like, yes, I can see your care and I feel your help and I'm grateful.
And what does that do for you when you hear that?
Oh, well, that feels like, okay, we're on. Like we can do what we're here for. It feels like, gives me a smile and a sense of readiness. Like, oh, if we're connected, then I think we can probably make use of the exploratory system,
Okay.
and because when kids feel the attachment figure with them, the attachment system, in a sense, goes quiet and the exploratory system comes on. So
Mm,
we like to use that. I like to think about that in therapy because oftentimes to heal, people need to explore the places where it didn't feel so good, or, I have this with you, but this certainly wasn't like what it was like when I was growing up. So sometimes people will have a natural compare contrast.
yeah,
Oh, yeah, this feels good, but what I would have loved to have had this when I was a teenager or when I was a kid or when blah, blah, blah was happening.
yeah. So even freezing that and putting you on the spot here, but when someone says that to you, I
Which,
I wish I would
uh-huh.
what basically what you're giving me right now, Karen, I wish I would have had that as a kid. Just if we freeze that, what do you feel when a client is saying that sensation wise and then emotion?
I feel tender, you
Yeah,
know, I feel tender. And then I think my exploratory system kicks in because where I went is like, oh, I wonder if we can find one of those ages and stages in you who might have wanted this. And if we can kind of bring them here and, see what it would be like. So, yeah, I think tenderness gets activated, and like wanting to give, wanting to be filling some of those gaps, voids. It's touching. It's really
yeah.
touching when someone is like getting something that they didn't get and recognizes it.
And then the other side of that, like the positive of getting it, but then having to recognize with them that they didn't get it. What happens then for you?
Could be lots of things, you
Yeah.
know, if they bring examples of when they
Sure.
needed it and didn't get it, I might feel sad. I might feel angry on their behalf. Um, I might be anything, stunned, shocked, hurt, scared. It just depends on because sometimes just in saying they didn't get it, they might be in touch with something that just comes into the room,
Sure.
you know? And so I might unwittingly notice my eyes start to water, or, I get nervous, don't know why. So I think the field between us when it's open, that right brain to right brain connection can, work both ways.
Yeah. No, and that, I mean I think it's important for, therapists to hear
Mm,
and clients to hear because sometimes, I mean, I've had clients where they would say they don't even know if their therapist cared or if that affected them, what they were saying. So
hmm
I asked that to bring out that there is feeling there, there is care there, but in AADP, it's explicit. You would share that if it's, in the right spot. So, yeah, I mean, thank you for sharing that. But I truly think that is important for people, to know. So,
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah, and I love, so many people when who are learning ADP or exposed to it are like, oh, what a relief. I get to love my patients. I get to feel my human sense of, you know, we're wired to care. And so it's so permission giving when folks feel that there's a place for it. And and AEDP does it in a way that's respectful, responsible, judicious. Like we're not just exuding all over the place in a way that's um, lacking attention to the impact.
right.
One of the things that's really cool about AEDP is if I do share a feeling or some self-disclosure, um, I'm going to follow it up and ask the client, how is that to hear?
Yeah,
What is it like for you to hear me share this with you? Because we really want to know. how it lands, you know. And
Yeah.
that can run the gamut of someone with a real, avoidant pattern. I might say something little and say, "How is that?" And it'd be like, "Don't patronize me. I'm okay. I don't need much." It's like,
Yes.
okay, that gives me one set of it,
Right. Yeah.
that's the other side.
For sure. For sure. Um, and so as we kind of wind down here, I think we can go into this more in a future episode. But disorganized pattern, right? Like if that's, kind of like think about it as a specifier, like with each different pattern,
Mm-hmm.
what can, obviously things can change or different for different people, but when you blend those two things together, what could you see?
You mean like if somebody has, an organized insecure pattern like avoidant or ambivalent, and then disorganization gets so if there's some unresolved trauma gets triggered,
Yes.
there's like there's a disorganizing effect.
Yes.
So it might be a collapse in the system. It might be the light going out of someone's eyes. It might be, all of a sudden they're speaking in fragmented sentences and not finishing. And there's just this sense that we're circling around. And so I sometimes think of it as pockets of disorganization, that where there's unresolved trauma, there can be like a dropout in any of the patterns, secure, because the unresolved trauma is like there's missing links in the brain between being able to process something to completion. So there's like a fallout, So we talk about that. Or, you know, in the kids in the early studies, some of the disorganization is like can't feel, can't deal. The kid's caregiver is the one who's scary, frightened, or frightening themselves. And so that is disorganizing for the kid because the one I'm going to for protection is the one who scares me or hurts me.
Mm-hmm.
So then it's like a can't deal situation. But some kids develop role reversal strategies. So
Okay.
become caregivers to their parents or develop controlling, strategies that get really fixed by the time adults come in. So there can be someone with a super fixed controlling pattern that actually is coming out of disorganization and a way to protect all the turmoil inside. Yeah. And yeah. So does that respond to your
Oh
question?
yeah, yeah, yeah. I was, I always looked at it as a style or pattern, but that, makes a lot of sense, right? Depending on that person's interactions and early caregivers and trauma experienced. And so this, I mean, the whole thing of not having this fixed view, here are some things that we may or may not see, but just
Mhm.
having that be so flexible. And again, that brings me back to why, I mean, it just struck me when it was styles versus patterns. It just kind of brings, that full circle for me.
Yeah, more open. And one of the things about disorganization that, what someone will notice, there's a lot of compare contrast in the grids because I have these
Mhm.
columns that have each pattern next to itself. So in the avoidant column in in the relational defenses, we have wall of words,
Mhm.
and then with the ambivalent resistant pattern, we have wall of words with it ambivalent, wall of silence with avoidant, and with disorganized, incomplete expressions.
Oh, wow.
And that is a super helpful marker
Wow.
because I've had supervisees come in and say, I am so confused by what's going on with this patient. I can't figure out what's going on. And often we'll watch tape and listen and realize that the person's skipping and not finishing sentences. And this whole presentation is confusing
Mhm.
by the way that the fragmentation is revealing itself, or quick shifts. So That's a really helpful marker. And then a natural intervention is slowing down. Can you finish that sentence? Can you finish that thought?
Yeah.
And that actually helps to bring, some semblance of meaning. Or sometimes, I might reflect what I'm hearing. And it's like, I'll say, like, I use my reflective capacity when the person doesn't have a lot of their own reflective capacity online.
And what would that look like when you say you're using your own reflective capacity?
Mm, someone might not be able to put two and two together. They might kind of tell me fragments of a story, and then I might be able to go like, "Oh, I can get it. Like you were feeling this after this happened, and then that happened, and then we can see how this is your response to."
Yeah.
Oh, right. I never quite put that together before. You
Yeah.
know. So
Yeah.
there's just a way that we help, we talk about we can help to organize someone with this disorganization by, kind of creating a platform, reflecting, listening, and giving pieces back, collecting pieces, and then kind of seeing if we can tie a little bit together, make some meaning. And
Okay.
meaning making can be so organizing as well as regulating.
Right. Yeah, for sure. So last question, and I have to ask,
Okay.
what's it like writing a book with Diana Fosha?
Oh, honestly, it's been it was amazing. We have practiced because she helped me with this article I did first. Then we
Yeah.
wrote the AEDP 2.0 book. And so she's an amazing editor. And one of the things that I have appreciated is, from the beginning of this project, she saw the article, she saw the book. She was like, there's something here. There's your contribution. And so Diana saw my transformance with the book and really facilitated and supported, you know, me bringing it forward, and then, I would do a lot of the first drafts of most of the chapters. And we just had a great experience of going back and forth. Sometimes she'd fill in a sentence and it'd be like, oh, she'd carry the meaning of what I was trying to say and she'd take it further. Or I said sometimes it was like she would add a little salt and pepper and just kind of spice something up. Or she'd say like, can you rewrite this sentence or paragraph? Or honestly, one whole chapter I thought was like really getting to it. She's like, I think it needs a pretty big rewrite. And I was like, dang. She thought it'd need many, but I was really happy that it came forward the
Yeah.
go around. So, um, and I just have to say that it was exciting, safe, interesting collaboration. We had some really good discussions too, like around the disorganized chapter.
Mm.
Disorganization, really thinking about things and looking at this collapse of strategy. Oh, strategy of collapse came to me one day. It was like, that's interesting. Like I started to notice that, um, yeah, I just had this person who had a real difficult time being seen in a way with her partner, and then like went into this collapse, and it was like it was powerful, and it was just an interesting process to kind of watch how things unfold. So
Yeah.
anyway, it was super fun with Diana.
Okay. And so this is,
Satisfying. Yeah.
yeah, okay. This is I like to give you three words. There's no rules. Okay. And
Okay.
use these three words how you want to use these three words. The first one is safety. The second word is attunement. And the third word is transformation.
So use them how I want to use them.
Yep. What do those words mean to you based on just, kind of, because those are my words based on, just how this was for me. And so just those are the words that came up.
Uh-huh. How about, I mean, I don't know, I'll put them in a sentence.
That's
A-
yeah, that's good. There's no rules.
okay. I don't know. What's coming to me right now is attunement can give rise to safety, which
Okay,
can facilitate transformation.
it is. There it is. And so, what was it like doing this ADP for sure with me
Uh-huh.
today?
Oh, it's great, Gerald. I really appreciate and love talking to you, and I like your questions, and I feel relaxed and happy, and I love being able to think and talk about the book with you.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
really neat.
Okay. Thank
How
you.
is it for you to do it with
Oh,
me?
I loved it. I mean, I'm always trying to learn, and obviously, I love talking with you. And you've been such a influential person for me and pushed me in front of the room.
Hmm.
So doing this is surreal, but also settling. So yeah, I'm just happy and glad we're able to do it. And I hope we
Yes.
can do some more in terms of adult relationships, and really trying to understand. I have a ton of questions about that.
Okay.
Thing of patterns and my big thing with athletics. So hopefully we can do more.
I'd love that. That sounds great.
Okay. All right. Well, again, Karen Pando-Mars and Diana Fosha wrote Tailoring Treatment to Attachment Patterns, Healing Trauma in Relationships. And yeah, they can get this probably everywhere.
I think everywhere books are sold,
Everywhere
so
books are
go to your
sold.
favorite folks and ask them to get it. It's available.
That's how we do it. All right. Thanks, Karen.
Okay. Thanks, Gerald.